In this video, we're going to be talking about introduction to parasitology. In the previous video, we talked about the phylum Protozoan, and we are able to state the different class under the phylum Protozoan. And also, I was able to say that we have different types of protozoan. We have the free-living protozoan, we have the commensal, we have the saprophytic, and we have the parasitic protozoan. Which means in this class, we'll be talking about what is parasite itself, what branch of biology studies parasites, and let's talk about the learning objective of this particular slide. At the end of this class, students will be able to identify organisms which parasitize man, define common terms used in medical parasitology, list various environment and cultural socioeconomics, explain effects caused by parasites, describe the classification and characteristic of parasite groups, and explain the transmission, source of infection, and the mode of entry of parasites in man and other animals. Now let us talk about what is parasitology itself. Parasitology is a science that deals with parasites. In my own words, I can define parasitology as the branch of biology that study the it's a branch of biology that studies protozoans, helminths, and arthropods that tends to cause disease, or let me say, that tends to live on or inside an host, thereby causing harm to their host. Remember, I mentioned three things. I said protozoans, helminths, and arthropods. Example of protozoan is Entamoeba histolytica. Example of helminths, we have two. We have platyhelminths, that is flatworm, and nemathelminths, that is nematodes, roundworm. And arthropods, example is tick, lice, and other ones like that. So that is parasitology. What is a parasite itself? Since we say we are studying parasites, parasite is an organism that lives inside or outside their host, either temporarily or permanently, thereby deriving food, shelter, and other source of nutrient from their host and causing harm to their host. Now, like I said parasites they lives in or outside their host. That is what I just said. So that is what a parasite is. Now, nature of the parasites. A parasite could be unicellular, that is example is protozoan. It can be worm, that is example is nematode, and uh, and flatworm. And it can be an arthropod, example is tick and lice. That is the nature of a parasite. Let's now talk about features of parasites. Parasites are always smaller than their host. They outnumber the host. They have a short lifespan, and they have a greater uh, mode of replication. They can reproduce faster than their hosts. You understand? And that is the features of parasites. Now, moving from there to association of organisms, because before we can actually talk about parasitology, we must talk about other things before we can talk about parasitology. Now, association of what? Association of organisms. The first one is what? Is mutualism. Mutualism is a plus slash plus relationship between living organisms, whereby the both organism in that particular relationship benefit from each other. We know about that already. Talking about commensalism, it is plus slash zero. When I talk about, I said plus slash zero. That's the meaning, which means one benefits and the other one does not harm. It does not harm the other one. That is what I meant by plus slash zero. But we're not talking about parasitism. Talking about parasitism, it is one benefit, which is the parasite, and the other is harm, which is the what? Which is the host. I want to write a minus here. So it is plus slash minus relationship between living organisms. And these two living organisms are what? Are the parasites and the host. Because there is no how in the ecosystem where there won't be a relationship between living organisms. So parasitism is also a what? Is also a form of relationship between two organisms. And the first organism is the parasite, the second organism is the host. We'll talk about their definition later. Now, moving from there to classification of parasites. Parasites can be classified based on different things. The first thing is according to their habitat. According to their habitat, we can classify them into ectoparasites and endoparasites. Ectoparasites are those ones that lives outside the host. An example is tick, lice is an example of endoparasites. While ectoparasite rather, while endoparasite lives inside the host. It lives inside the host. An example of endoparasite is Leishmania species, Ascaris lumbricoides, Entamoeba histolytica, Toxoplasma gondii, Trichomonas vaginalis, Trichomonas tenax, Dracula mendinensis, Wucheria bancrofti, Wuncheria volvulus, and so on like that. These are examples of endoparasites. Now, that is first classification. The second classification is according to the dependence on their host. That's the second thing. According to what? Dependence on their host. Now, according to dependence on their host, they can be classified into two. That is either permanent, that is, they live inside their host permanently. They depend on the host completely for everything, for shelter, for metabolites, for transportation. An example of that is Plasmodium species. It's an example of that. So that is permanent what? That is permanent parasites or obligate parasites. We now have temporary or facultative parasites. Temporary or what? Temporary or facultative parasites. An example of that is Naegleria fowleri and Strongyloides stecularis. These are parasites that are capable of living outside their host. Apart from their parasitic form, they can still survive outside their host. Are you getting me? So that is what you mean by what temporary parasite. Now, the third thing is according to their pathogenicity. We have two types. We have three types rather. We have three types. The first one is pathogenic parasites. Pathogenic parasites. The second one is non-pathogenic parasites. And the third one is opportunistic parasites. Pathogenic parasites are those parasites that causes disease in host. They cause what? Disease in host. Which means not all parasites cause disease in host. Are you getting me now? Not all parasites causes disease in host. Example of those that causes disease in host is Entamoeba histolytica, and it causes a disease known as amoebiasis. Are you getting me now? Entamoeba histolytica. Now, the second one is non-pathogenic parasites or commensal parasites. These ones, they derive nutrient from their host, but they do not cause disease in the host. They harm the host, but they do not cause a specific disease. Example is Entamoeba coli, Trichomonas tenax, Trichomonas fructus. These are example of what? These are example of non-pathogenic parasites. They derive nutrient from their host. Even they cause harm to the host, but they do not cause a specific disease. They do not cause a specific disease to the host. That is what I'm trying to say. Now, the third one is opportunistic parasites. And these opportunistic parasites, they have two forms. They cause mild disease. And when I say mild disease, they cause small disease in immunologically healthy host. If someone is healthy, they only cause small disease. Are you getting me now? But once they see that someone is sick already, like the person is immunodeficient, they are going to cause a great disease in that particular individual. Are you getting me now? So they causes a mild disease in immunologically healthy hosts and a great disease in what? In immunodeficient host. And an example is Toxoplasma gondii, Isospora belli, and Pneumocystis cami. These are examples of opportunistic parasites. Now, moving from there to host. What is an host? An host is an organism. An host is a what? Is an organism that harbors the parasites. That was that harbors the parasites, which means host is the one that takes the parasite in. We now have different type of host. We have the definitive host and we have the intermediate host. We have the what? The definitive host and the intermediate host. The definitive host harbors a parasite at a specific life cycle and mostly a sexually matured life cycle of the parasite. That is where they harbor them, which means when a parasite is sexually matured, or let me say the sexual phase of their life cycle occurs inside that particular host. Example is Anopheles mosquito is a definitive host of Plasmodium parasite because sexual stage of Plasmodium exists inside the what? Inside the gut of a mosquito. Are you getting me now? Also, man is the definitive host of trypanosome because the sexual phase of the trypanosome exists inside the man. We have three. We call them polymorphic. That is the stumpy, the slender, and the intermediate trypanosome. It all exists inside the what? Inside the blood of a man. Are you getting me now? So that is the definitive host. But the intermediate host harbors the sexually immature parasites. Are you getting me now? It harbors what? The sexually immature parasites. An example is cow. Cow is an intermediate host of Tinea saginata. So it's an example. We now have amplifier hosts. Amplifier host is an example of host in which a parasite undergoes multiplication. They multiply rapidly inside a particular host. We have reservoir hosts are those ones that harbors the parasites so that they can cause infection to man. We have carrier hosts. Those are the ones that carry it from one place to another. We have accidental hosts. These are the ones that are not the normal host of that particular species. They just carry it accidentally by mistake. That is accidental host. Are you getting me now? Now, this is an example of an ectoparasite. Look at this. This is a tick. Can you see? Outside the what? Outside a dog. This is a tick outside a dog. So it is an ectoparasite. Can you see that? It is staying outside the host. This is an example of endoparasite. This is what we know as Dracocula mendinensis, an example of endoparasite. Can you see that it is staying inside the host? Can you see? And a blue marker, can you see it is staying inside the host? And they are trying to pull it out because it can actually be pulled out. But the operation is very, very dangerous because once you try to pull it out like this and it's able to run back in, it might not be able, like you might not be able to pull it out again, which we can actually talk about later. So this is Dracocula mendinensis. It is an endoparasite. So it stays inside the host. Can you see inside the leg of the host? So we'll talk about those ones. So this is an endoparasite. So moving from there to a vector. A vector is always like an arthropod, mostly an arthropod, or other living organisms that carries a parasite from one host to another. That carries a what? A parasite from one host to another. We have different type of vector. We have biological vector. These are vector that complete the life cycle of a parasite. Example is Anopheles mosquito, Glossina palpalis or Glossina species. Even man is an example of biological vector. We now have mechanical vector. These are the ones that just transport it. They don't have any effect on the life cycle of that particular parasite. Example are fruit flies like cockroaches and housefly. Housefly, when they land on a fishes, they can carry an egg of an entamoeba histolytica. Then they put it on your food. You understand? Then you consume it. They just transport. They do not have any effect on the life cycle of that particular what of that particular parasite. That is what? That is mechanical host. Now, then we now have different stage of infection, which we will talk about in the next video. In this video, we have talked about what is parasitology, introduction to parasitology, and we say parasitology is the branch of science I talk about that deals with the study of helminthes and the protozoan that can cause harm to their hosts. I'll talk about different association. Example of association is what? The association like commensalism, mutualism, parasitism, symbiotic. You understand? These are example of association. And we classify parasites into different types. We classify them into according to their dependence on the host, according to their habitats, according to other things like that that we classify them into. So these are what? These are terminologies used in parasitology. And in the next video, we'll be talking about infection and the infective stage of an infection. That is what we'll be talking about in the next video. Thank you for listening.